You know, so a child's going to be afraid of a needle, especially if a child's got a needle before. Most children are smart enough to figure out they should be afraid of the needle even when they haven't had it. But the thing is that if you come into contact with something that's already caused you pain, and now there's something that only signals that that's likely to happen, that's when you experience fear. Okay, and fear is its own circuit, again, which is where the behaviors in some sense went a little bit wrong too. Because they thought of unconditioned punishment, which produces pain, as the primary motivational system. So it would be unconditioned punishment, unconditioned reward. Then there were things you learned about those that produced conditioned punishment and conditioned reward. Okay, but all of those have circuits, independent circuits. So the defense and avoidance negative emotions seem to be roughly pain, anxiety, and fear, but then there's disgust. And people have been looking at disgust a lot lately, and it doesn't load on neuroticism. It doesn't seem to load on neuroticism, so it's its own circuit. So, okay, so here's one other complexity that you need to grapple with, which is there are things that hurt that cause you pain. There are things that are satiating and that are consummatory reward. Then there are things that signal each of those. But there's one class of stimuli, so to speak, or things that you're going to encounter that are paradoxical. And that's the class of things that you don't understand. That's novelty. And novelty, it's novelty itself that's sort of associated with what the phenomenologists are primarily concerned about. The idea of the revelation of meaning. Because the revelation of meaning is mostly associated with you encountering something that you haven't already understood, right? You explore that, new information comes out of it, a new you comes out of it. Okay, so you're going from point A to point B. What might happen? Well, things might happen that appear to demonstrate that you're on the right track. So that makes you happy. That's the yellow box, positive emotion. You know, your pathway is being facilitated, so that's why tools are sort of in that category. Or you can be moving towards point B and something gets in your way. And that might be something that hurts you. And that hurt would be pain or disappointment or frustration or grief. Or something that signals that you might get hurt, which is threat, and that produces fear. And so the positive emotion is moving you towards the desired goal, and the negative emotion is protecting you. And so if a negative thing happens, you'll stop and then you'll reconfigure the behavior that you're using or the framework in order to get around the obstacle and to continue. Or if it's a bad enough obstacle, you might say, well, I'm too tired to eat and I'm too hungry to sleep. That happens to people, right? It's a conflict of motivations. And so if you get up and you go into the cupboard and you find out there's nothing to eat, you might say, oh, to hell with it, then I'll just go to sleep. You know, so sometimes the way you solve a problem is by flipping the problem. It's like, we're not going to solve that problem right now, we'll turn to another problem. And that's an exploratory move. Sometimes you operate within the frame, you know. You go to the cupboard is bare, but you're hungry, so you walk down to the corner store and you get something to eat. And so that way you've sort of stayed within the frame and altered, you know, you've altered your behavior you've thought up another path and altered your behavior so that that motivated state can run to completion. Here's another way of looking at it. You can be moving from point A to B, and what you predict or want is happening. That's a good thing. That keeps your mood straight and you happy, and that makes you hope. That's a promise. With the promise is you're going to get what you want, and that fills you with hope. That's positive emotion. Or you can have an unpredicted outcome when you're, you know, I don't know, you're supposed to be going out with your friend, you go to the door, you knock, and there's nobody there. So it's like, what's up with that? And so it's, in a sense, when that happens, there's like a hole in your framework, you know, because your framework was predicated on the presence of your friend, right? It was a presupposition. And so now and then you'll run out of behavioral routine, and one of your presuppositions is wrong. And it's sort of like there's a hole in your theory, and the hole, you sort of drop into it. And when you drop into that hole, you get anxious, because you don't know exactly what this unexpected thing means. And behind that, you get exploratory. So with most people, they're going to get afraid first. They're going to have negative emotion first when their little plan is blown. And then, if nothing additionally awful happens, and if they don't drive themselves crazy with some hypothesis about he doesn't like me anymore, and so no one likes me anymore, so I'm a terrible person, you know, then once they calm down a little bit, the exploration circuit will come up, and maybe they'll walk somewhere else, go to a bar, or maybe they'll stand there and think, well, you know, this didn't work out, so what else could I do? An emotionally stable person, say a non-neurotic person, they'll flip to that really fast, especially if they're extroverted and open. Whereas someone who's heavy in negative emotion, you know, the fact that their friend wasn't there when they told them they would be, that might just produce a hole that they fall into, and it's, you know, so deep and painful they just go home and cry. So the neuroticism and the extroversion are, in some sense, they vary with the degree to which the negative emotion system is strong or the positive emotion system is strong. And they're two different systems. And so you can think of them, in some sense, you can think of them as units of positive emotion per unit of promise. It's a weird thing to try to quantify. Or units of negative emotion per unit of threat. So, you know, if there's a rumor going around that you're going to lose your job. Well, how much should you worry about that? Well, God, you don't know. So how do you decide? Well, you don't. Your wiring decides. So if you're high in negative emotion, you're going to get all anxious and freak out about it, which might be the right thing to do. Maybe you will lose your job. And if you're emotionally stable, you're going to think, I probably won't lose my job, but even if I do, I'm not going to worry about it. It's innate, or a lot of it's innate. So